Hi, and welcome to the Everything and Anything and a Bit Gay podcast. I am really thrilled to have Jennifer Robbins, my good friend, back in the studio with me today. Hi, Jen.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
You're welcome. So today we are going to talk about my adventure of moving from Miami after I graduated college to New York City. So the way it happened is I graduated college in April of 1998 and decided that I was going to go to New York City. Jen and I had a class trip our senior year to New York City, and we should just talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, we
We
had our journalism class in high school used to do this thing with Columbia University every year where and all these high schools across the country could come to Columbia for a week and take classes and whatever. And I went junior year and Zach didn't, but told him of course how awesome it was. So I don't even think you were in the class. We just found a way to make it as usual. Zach found loopholes. We
yeah,
found a
found a
way to have
loophole.
you included. He couldn't be excluded basically just because he wasn't in this class, I guess. So anyway, so he came.
No, but I did write some things for
Oh,
the
that's
school
what it was. You
newspaper.
were like
Yeah,
the
I was like the guest.
guest
Yeah.
columnist, and we knew
So
the editor.
yeah, and we knew the editor, our good friend Gina. So we ended up going to New York City as seniors, and we went with this journalism teacher who was just new to the school. Right, it was her first year.
Did she work there?
I
Are
don't
we
even know if she
sure?
worked there. So we went there and we seen her at the airport as we were flying, and when we got to this hotel that was in the now Hell's Kitchen, it was, like, on 8th and 51st, which wasn't the best neighborhood, in the, early '90s in New York
It was
City.
before the cleanup, the Giuliani
It was way
cleanup.
before the cleanup. There was lots of prostitutes and adult bookstores everywhere and pimps and,
Times Square was Times Square.
Times Square was the real Times Square. And, we basically never seen the teacher again after we got to the hotel.
No.
That 5 or 6 days that we were there, we were on our own. I think I went to 2 of the Columbia classes, and I'm like, "I'm not going to any more of these, I don't care about this." And Jen's like, "But we're here in New York, we gotta
We
do
gotta
this,
go
this
to
is
the
why we're here."
class.
I'm like, "Listen, I ain't going, if you wanna I'm exploring New York." So nobody went back to the class again. We all
You
just
we all followed Zach's lead.
and we basically had 5 or 6 days in New York City as 17 and 18-year-olds exploring New York with no teacher at all.
Right. I
Actually,
remember the only sign of life from her was, like, the room service tray outside her door with, like, all the empty liquor bottles and
yeah, and she had guests coming in her room,
Mhm.
we decided, because there were several courses that were on
Yeah,
the room service tray. I
yeah,
think we stayed at a Howard Johnson's.
we did.
Yeah. The only time we did see her was one night for a dinner or something where she got on the train with us on the subway, and remember she was wearing a big fur coat, and she says,
Yes.
"Alright, kids, let's get back to the hotel and clean up our Uzis," or something like crazy. She's yelling it out in the subway as if we're, like, gang members or something. Remember? It was like
Yes.
some
Raped, robbed, and ripped off.
oh, yeah, "We're not gonna get raped, robbed, and ripped off in this city." We're all, like,
It's this
scared.
crazy woman and all these teenagers,
Exactly,
obviously not from here.
right.
Oh god, yeah.
So anyway, that's how I also went to New York, I guess it was that summer after with my
Mhm.
parents, and my brother, we went to New York and I told my dad when we left, I'm like, "I'm gonna move to New York." And he's like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." He didn't believe me, but I always had it in my head that I was going to move to New York. And so after I graduated college, after switching my major, I think I switched my major at least 4 times, and then we had Hurricane Andrew, and so I had lots of delays in graduating, college, but I finally did graduate, and then I moved to New York. So I told Jen, "Hey, I'm moving. I'm quitting my job at Florida Power& and Light as a customer service person, and I'm selling my Mustang." And, I sold it to my friend Tony's partner, Doug, at the time, and he bought it, and so I think I had, like, $7,000 cash, and
You were flush with cash.
I had a lot of cash, but I had no credit cards because I blew my credit in college by going out and buying new clothes and new shoes, and I just had crappy credit after college because I didn't have good credit as a most college kids don't. And so, I rented a U-Haul, I packed up the U-Haul, and Jen was living in Fort
Fort
Lauderdale,
Lauderdale, yep.
and I'm like, "I'm on my way to pick you up," and it was very traumatic to leave. I was living with my parents again because I moved from South Beach back to my parents' house because of some roommate issues, and, so I was leaving my parents' house and, drove to Fort Lauderdale, picked up Jen after crying. I actually was crying very hard because I was leaving my parents, and I
Yeah.
it was my father that really made me sad because he never cries, and he was crying whenever I was leaving, and my mother told me that he went and laid in my empty room in the floor for a couple of hours because he was so sad that I was leaving home, but not just leaving home, like, moving to a house in Miami. I
Yeah.
was moving to another state. And so, anyway, Jen and I had this U-Haul. Um, what happened was is that the U-Haul wasn't in the best shape. I think it had like 100,000 miles or something on it. And you couldn't and it was July of 1998. It was summer. It was hot. And if you turned the air conditioning on for too long, it would start to overheat.
It
And
also
I
had an alarm if you drove we realized we were, like, driving in North Florida somewhere, and this alarm started going off, and we thought the car was on fire or something, so we pulled over
yeah.
and got out, and then nothing we couldn't find anything wrong with it, so we started driving again, and it started again. We finally realized if you went over, like, 70 miles an hour or 65 miles an
Yes,
hour,
I remember
the
that
alarm would
now.
go off, so we
Yes,
had to
yes,
drive the whole way at, like, 60 miles an hour.
yes.
I remember we were afraid to, like, start the car again because we thought it was
Yeah.
gonna blow up because it also kept overheating.
Well, we found out that the coolant was leaking, so we had to
Oh,
stop, like,
God, I forgot about that.
every 90 miles or something and get new antifreeze or coolant or whatever that stuff is, that blue stuff, and put it in this U-Haul so it wouldn't overheat because it was leaking. And, and then Jen I was driving part of the time, and I'm like, "Jen, I can't drive this thing. This thing is just too big." Like, if a semi was going by us, I was, like, scared that we were running off, and Jen fell asleep at one point, and I'm like, "Oh my god, we're gonna die in a ball of fiery death on the side of this road in Georgia, and no one's ever gonna find us."
Let me be
So
clear, I was envisioning when you told me you were renting a U-Haul, I was picturing one of those little Mayflower, those nice vans with, like, a truck attachment.
mm,
No, this
no,
was falling apart. It was legit like a truck that, like, bounced around.
yeah,
You had to, like, hold the steering wheel with both hands. There was
yeah,
no, like, just relaxing and listening to the radio.
and you knew how to drive bigger cars because you drove these big
The
vans that
van.
your family had.
Right.
And so I'm like, "Jen, please drive." And she goes, "Fine, I'll drive, but you have to do something for me."
Oh god.
Yeah. I said, "Whatever you want." So Jen had a bit of a fantasy with a hockey
It
player.
was just a crush.
It was a stalking thing that she did, and she's like, "Well, he has a house in New Jersey. Can we drive by there?" I'm like, Fine, do whatever you want." So we drove by this
You didn't
house.
tell me this was gonna be part of the
Yeah,
go to
yeah,
New
it's part
York.
of the I'm not gonna say the hockey
Okay,
player's
yeah,
name,
let's not do that.
because I'm sure there's already
A
some type of
warrant.
a warrant out on you
A
already.
restraining order.
And so we drive by this guy's house. He has a gardener out front, and I start yelling, "She's here, Jen's here, she's here for you." And then she goes, "He doesn't live here anymore." I'm like, "What?" Because I just wanted to see where he used to live. "Whatever."
We were
So,
like a half an hour off the freeway.
yeah,
In
it's like
this
a half
truck, by the way, we're not in a car.
yeah, we're
Reminder,
in this
we're in this
overheating truck in July that has no air conditioning, and we're pulling off to look at a house that this hockey player that she's in love with and stalked for years is no longer living there. So, anyway,
It was good to see.
we got to New York City. We were staying in a hotel in New Jersey because we needed to park the humongous U-Haul truck that we had, and we would take a bus into Manhattan to look for apartments. So I had a job, just to say I had a job, a crappy $35,000 a year job at a nonprofit agency or company, but I had no apartment. And we had 3 days to find an apartment. And if we didn't find an apartment, I had a plan that we were gonna put all my stuff in storage in Queens, and we were gonna stay at the Chelsea Inn
Yep.
hostel or something, or maybe it wasn't a hostel, but it was like a sketch hotel in Chelsea.
I don't know, you were gonna stay there. My flight home was already booked
No, but you were gonna have to stay there for a couple of
for, like,
nights.
couple nights, yeah.
Yeah, and, so anyway, we go to a couple of realtors, they show us apartments. One apartment we looked at, I'm like, I didn't even know where we were. We were on the Upper East Side. I really didn't even know what the Upper East Side meant. I didn't I mean, I was just so new to New York, and I didn't there was I don't know, I just didn't know where I wanted to live. I knew I wanted to live in a gay neighborhood, but then I realized I couldn't afford Chelsea, and I couldn't afford the West Village. So I was looking at places. I think we were looking at newspapers for, like,
Yeah.
the Village Voice and stuff. We
Yep, the
were
Village
looking.
Voice, I remember that.
And so we go look at an apartment, we look at a couple places, and then there was one apartment that we looked at. It was on East 90th Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenue, and it was a 4th floor walk up, and it was a studio, and it was a typical New York studio. And we told the realtor, "Oh, we'll get back to you," or whatever. And then we're walking, I think we walked to 85th Street, which is the main street in the Upper East Side, and we're standing there. I'm like, "I don't know, maybe we should call some more." And Jen turned to me and looked, she goes, "Listen, you need to take this apartment." You wanna tell the audience what you said?
I don't remember. I remember having this conversation because I remember it was the phone booth outside that juice place.
Yes,
I can't
Jamba
remember.
Juice.
Yes.
And she goes, "You need to get your shit together, and you need to take this apartment, call, because I'm not staying in any hostel, and you don't want to either. And so call this guy and tell him you're taking the apartment." And I was just like,
I had to
"Oh,
put my foot down.
you put your foot down for sure." And so I called the guy and I said, "Can we come by now and I can do this and get this apartment?" He goes, "Yes." So I go, we sign the lease. Um, of course, they wouldn't take an out-of-state check, so I'm trying to, like, figure
Ugh.
out how to get cash out of the ATM. There was a limit of $500 a day, but they ended up letting me write a check, and they said if it doesn't clear, you're gonna get kicked out or something, like, sketchy or whatever. But so basically, the apartment was $1,039 a month. I had to put a first month's, last month's security, and I had to pay a broker's fee, which was 1 month too. So when you have 7,000 or so dollars, that was a big chunk in it. I also had to pay for the hotel that we were staying in, and I had to pay for the U-Haul, and then there were some other expenses. And I think by the time we were done, I think I had like $1,100 left of cash by the time we returned the U-Haul and paid for the hotels and stuff. So we had this 4th floor walk up. My friend Gina came over and helped us move, and I had probably 200 pairs of shoes and boots, I guess, do you
In
think, as a guess?
giant plastic bags. Yeah,
And giant
at least
plastic
200.
bags, and we had to walk these up the 4 flights of stairs to the 4th floor.
We?
Yes,
Me and Gina.
me too.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were all doing it, but somebody had to watch the truck, so I think I watched the truck
I
sometimes.
think
I
you
didn't
went
have
and
to.
got water or something.
Yeah, I was getting you waters and stuff, but and we had to move my bed up, and I brought my twin size bed from my parents' house up there, and thank God I didn't have anything bigger because it wouldn't have fit in this apartment. And, I don't think I
First, we
had a.
had to clean it. We had to clean it, and
Oh,
this it was
yeah.
a studio, but it was basically 3 areas. There was the main, like, living area, the kitchen, and the bathroom, and we divided it up, the 3 of us, and we just told Zach, "You have the bathroom. Like, this is your apartment. You
So
take the bathroom." Gina took the bullet and did the kitchen.
but when she opened up the refrigerator, she about died from the smell.
We almost died, yeah.
Yes.
And I remember
And
there was some noise. It sounded like you were hurling coming from the bathroom, and I was like, "What's going on? Is he okay?" And she, like, looked, and she said, "Yeah, he's okay. He was just getting skeeved out."
yeah, it was disgusting because, like, somebody took a shower in that bathtub for about 6 years, and they never cleaned it. It was just, like, pure body grease built up. It was
God.
so disgusting with hairs and stuff. I'm just like, "Oh, it's so gross." And Gina basically took, like, a half a bottle of bleach, held her nose, threw it in the refrigerator, and then closed it. She goes, "It will be okay in 10 minutes." And then she opened it up, and it was fine. It just
It
smelled like
was
bleach.
fine. She was experienced.
Yeah, she was experienced. So, we, got everything moved in finally. Again, it's July in New York City, and New York City apartments don't come with central air when they're this old. And so we had no air conditioner, and I never thought about that, like, because I was living in Florida with central air s AC and everywhere I lived mostly, and, but there was no air conditioner. So we were scared to sleep with the windows down because it was New York, and there was the fire escape, and Jen's like, "You can't
Right.
open that because somebody's gonna come in and kill us." I'm like, "But it's really hot." And then, the apartment also had a horrible roach problem, and the plan was that we were gonna make a little bed for Jen on the floor to sleep where I was, and we were both like, "Yeah, no one's sleeping on that floor because who's gonna have a roach crawl on them?" And who knows, we didn't know if there was rats or mice or whatever else was in there, so also, the bathtub water came out brown at times, and we weren't sure why. It was the rusty pipes, but we're not quite sure what that was about either. So, so anyway, we were living I was there, and then Jen, said, "We're sleeping in the bed together," and it wasn't because she was in love with me, it was because she's like, "I'm not gonna get eat by roaches."
I think you thought I might sleep on the floor. I think you were hoping I would sleep on the
Oh,
floor.
I was hoping, yeah, because we just it it was hot, and if you touched me, I was burning, so
We slept, like, head to feet, whatever, we
yeah.
slept opposite because it was so hot, it was so
It was
horrible.
so hot.
This is the
Yeah, we had
only
no blankets or
this is like things you
cheapas.
do only when you're, like, 20 something years
Oh,
old.
yeah. I mean, totally. So we did that, and then,
Twin
I
bed,
re
by the way, twin
huh?
bed.
A twin
It was
bed,
a twin
yes.
bed.
And then, the other thing I didn't realize is that you have to pay for a locksmith to come because I had a big hole in my door that had no lock, and so I had to call a locksmith to have a deadbolt put in. And living in New York, I didn't realize it was gonna be $800. So, the guy came, put it in, he's like, $800 there, okay, so there's a little bit more of my $1,100 that I had left gone, and then I had to buy a Metro card, which I think was about $100 at the time for the month. So, I had to go buy a Metro card because I had to go down to 42nd Street for work, I c was too far to walk, so I did that, bought a Metro card, so then I had about $200 left, and I had no food in the refrigerator.
And you weren't getting
So
it was your first job. You were just starting this job, so your paycheck wasn't gonna come. You know how there's always that
yeah,
delay?
for like 2 or 3
Yeah.
weeks.
Yeah.
So I had 2 or 3 weeks to live on $200 living in New York City, and, I refused to ask my parents for help because I wanted to do this on my own, and my dad asked me at one point, "Do you want some money?" And I said, "Nope, I'm doing this on my own," and I stuck to that, and then I said, "We gotta go to the grocery store." So we went to a Key Food, in the Upper East Side, and, I guess I just also didn't think about you don't have a car to drive up and put your stuff in the trunk and come home and unload your car. You gotta walk all this stuff several blocks and then walk 4 flights up. But we went to the grocery store and it's New York prices, and I didn't realize how expensive groceries were. So $200 even in 1998 did not get you very far in New York City. And so Jen showed me how to bargain shop at the grocery
He's
store.
putting in his Kraft singles, his Raisin Bran, Kellogg's Raisin Bran,
Yep,
whatever, everything name
name brand.
brand. I'm like, "Your name brand days are over.
Right.
Let me introduce you. There is a generic equivalent-ish
I think
who's
one of them
Key
was like
Food
that
cheese."
white box of black letters on it or something like macaroni and cheese. I'm like,
"I
is
just
this
want
for
Kraft." I'm like, "You can't get Kraft. Kraft is like 3 times the price."
like, this is for poor people. She's like, "You're poor."
I told him what ramen noodles were, 6 for a dollar.
Yeah, I didn't know what ramen noodles were. I never when I lived in South Beach with my roommate, that's why I had credit card debt because we were, going out to nice restaurants and buying new outfits for every night of the week. So I never had to live like a poor person, and I was
I was
poor.
like, a loaf of bread, a thing of singles, cheese singles, and some ramen noodles.
Yeah, and
That's
so
it.
I got that. There was no, like but we did buy bottled water, but we got generic bottled water because 'cause I'm like, "I'm not drinking the water out of that sink."
Yeah. It
And,
was the 2-gallon bottles of water, like the old school bottles of water,
yeah,
not
yeah, it wasn't Evian or,
yeah, no.
or Vase or whatever, no. And, so we got that, and then, I learned how to sacrifice a lot of things, like, I had to get a second job at Pier 1 Imports to make ends meet, and, And I was lucky enough, after I was there for about, I guess, a week, I ended up getting a direct deposit into my account from my old job because they paid out my vacation time.
Mm.
So I got like, I don't know, $1,500 and I felt like, "Oh my god." And I think I was just so thrilled that I was able to then take that money and go out and do something because I was living in New York, sitting in my apartment because I had no money other than walking around, but I couldn't buy anything. And, but it was a fun adventure. I mean, Jen she got a nickname, as the truck driver, which we called her Big Shirley driving. And, when we emptied the truck from moving and we were taking it back to New Jersey, I said, "Just don't go through Times Square with this truck. Like, let's not take the U-Haul through Times Square." And the next thing you know, there's all the
Or
signage in Times Square. She's driving us directly through. I think we were, like, on 47th or 46th Street where we're just going right across from east to west and
I
right through the middle of Times Square. It
I
was
remember driving up, like, in this crazy truck that neither of us knew how to handle, driving north on 95 from Florida. There's not really a lot going on through Florida,
oh,
Georgia,
nothing.
the Carolinas, and then you're getting closer, those cities are coming, like Washington, DC, and
Yeah.
Philly, and we're like, "How are we gonna drive this?" And you started saying, "Oh, I'm tired. I think it's your turn to drive." And
Yeah.
then we were both nervous about driving into New York. What are we gonna do? How are we gonna get it to your apartment? But I remember going through the Lincoln Tunnel. I remember I kept going through toll booths in
Yeah.
the car lane because I was just
Oh my god,
that's
that's
just
right.
that's
You
what you
almost took the
do.
whole
And you were like, you can't go through the car lane, you're too big. So we'd squeeze through these toll booths. And then when we finally made it to New York, the only way in was the Lincoln Tunnel that we could see.
yes,
And we went
right.
through, and you were like, "Oh my God, you went through the car lane again. This is not a car." And we literally, it felt like there was like an inch around us
There
in the
was
tunnel. It's like, oh
but
my
when we went
God.
through Times Square, like, I remember I was laughing so hard and so were you. I'm like, "We're gonna crash because 'cause we're laughing so hard." Like, I was crying because it was so funny.
And there's no lanes in Manhattan. Like, I mean, if you've been there,
Lanes
you
don't
know
exist.
what it's like driving. I mean, it was just crazy.
It was just hysterical, but, I mean, I wouldn't have wanted to do it with anybody else, and I still, even though it's been 26 years since I did
Mhm.
that move to New York, I feel like I still owe you and Gina for helping me move, especially you for driving up with
I
me,
think
and
we need a
then
reunion trip.
we
I know
do.
Gina's not that far outside of New York now, but
Yeah, and, I'm actually the funny thing is that we're getting ready to do another move, and, have double the amount of shoes now, and Andrew says, "Oh, aren't you gonna put your shoes in garbage bags?" I'm like, "These are Gucci. These aren't the shoes that I moved to whenever I moved to New York 26 years ago. We don't put these in garbage bags. We put these in the box."
we still talk about the shoes and the bags and the driving through the tunnel, and there's
It
just so
was
many things
just
from that trip that stay
it was
all
just
these
it
years
was just
later.
an insane thing, and then am so proud of myself for, like, getting up and doing it, though, and having a job and just, like, picking up and doing it, and would I do something like that today? Hell no. I think you do that type of stuff when you're in your 20s and you just don't have a care in the world and you just move up and, if I would have known that $35,000 a year really wasn't a lot to live in Manhattan, I probably wouldn't have done it, but if I didn't do this, I wouldn't be where I'm at, I wouldn't be with Andrew.
Yeah,
My whole life would have been completely it would have been a completely different life if I
yeah,
didn't pick up and move to New York. I wouldn't have these jobs that I have. I wouldn't who knows where I'd be at, so
yeah. It sounds like it was impulsive, but it really wasn't. I mean, I remember about it is that you had a plan. I mean, I remember everything we just talked about, of course, but I also remember you had a plan. And
yeah,
you were always that way. Like if you wanted a new car, you had the plan and you didn't give up till you got it. And this was the same thing. I mean, I remember you wrote in my
yeah,
yearbook that you wanted to live in New York. You were always talking about moving to New York. And this was like months, maybe even more than a year in the making
yeah. I mean,
where you were
I did
planning.
a lot of planning. I just didn't it was just hard to plan. The other
Yeah.
thing is that, since my credit was so bad, I had no cell phone.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
And, so I relied on my no, it's not that my
Did you have a
credit would affect my
pager
cell phone.
still, or I can't
I
remember.
couldn't afford a cell phone because it was they charged you by the minute then,
Oh, yeah. Yep.
and I'm just like, "This is a luxury I can't have anymore," so I had to give it up. So I had a home landline phone, and that's what I used for dial-up for AOL and for
Oh,
to get on the internet, but also to call my friends, it was charged by the minute. There wasn't unlimited
Mhm.
long distance on landlines back then. This
Yeah.
makes me sound very old.
It's true though, everything was like I only talked to my parents when I moved away, like, once a week. It's
Yeah,
not
so,
like it is now.
I
There's
was
no
like,
texting.
living in New York, and I was kind of not scared, but I was, like, a little nervous about living there. I remember whenever you took a taxi to the airport and, like, I walked you downstairs and I walked back up to my apartment, I'm like, "Oh my god," like, "I'm here by myself in New York City in this apartment full of roaches,
What am I
and
doing?
what am I doing?"
What have I done?
But I remember you bought me a very cute gift, a going away gift. Your departure gift was you gave me a journal book. And I remember there was a park down the street from my apartment, and I went down there and I rode in that, and I rode in that for a while actually as my adventure night, and I think I know where I'll find it whenever I'm doing this move. But I when we moved back to Boston this last time, I found it. I'll find it again, and I'll take
Oh,
some
yeah,
pictures of it and send
definitely.
it to you.
That's funny. What's funny is that you and I have both moved 1,000 times since then.
It's
After
so crazy.
living in our hometown and not moving, we've done nothing
Exactly.
but move.
Been nothing but moves,
We are
but
expert movers. But you have me beat, I think. I think we
we
were even for a while. I think you because 'cause I've stayed in one place the last few years.
yeah, I've had 18 moves.
I think I'm like 12 or something,
Yeah, so
12 or 13.
So we have one more this month, and after that, I think we'll have one more when we actually buy a place, and then we're done moving. So
You've said
it's
that
time to
before. We'll
retire.
see, we'll see.
Well, thanks, Jen, for the memories and the good times, and I
This was
wouldn't have done it
great.
with anybody else but you. So thank you so much, and more good adventures like that in the future, hopefully, or not. Jen, can you hear me?
Yeah, you cut out.
Oh, I'll edit this part then. I said, thanks so much, Jen, for doing this adventure with me and bringing back these fun memories, and to more fun adventures in the future.
Definitely. It was so great. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, thanks everybody for joining. Be sure to subscribe to my podcast in your favorite platform. Shoot me an email, Zach at everythingandanythingpodcast.com. Talk to you next week.